Hey there, welcome back. This is part 2 of venue comparison.
The reception is the single largest wedding expense that you're going to have within your wedding budget. Typically, a wedding reception is approximately 30% of your overall budget. For a purchase so large, it's really important to ensure that as you are going through the wedding planning process, that you're appropriately allocating and budgeting for an expense so large to ensure that you're still able to accomplish all the other things that you have in your mind that you would like to see for your wedding day.
When I talk about venues, I like to break them down into 4 different categories: all-inclusive, partially inclusive, DIY, and your backyard or tent style wedding.
Say all inclusive, I mean that they have in-house catering staff, so there are no options for outside catering. You would use the caterer that they provide and select from the menu options that that caterer has. In addition to that, those venues generally hold the liquor license, and so from there you would also be held to whatever the charges are for the bar. Some are going to price it per person, some are going to price it on consumption. That's going to vary from venue to venue, but that would be what I consider an all-inclusive. When I say all-inclusive, it's a pretty large category because there are so many venues that have in-house catering options and have a liquor license.
Consider a hotel, a country club, standalone venues that are all-inclusive.
Within that all-inclusive, there's some other options that may also be included or part of a package in some of those wedding venues. They are going to vary across the board.
You're not having to bring in caterers, you're not having to bring in linens, you're not having to bring in separate china and that sort of thing. So I consider that to be all-inclusive. Now, that is a very wide range of venue styles, and not all of them are going to be the same. Some of those venues are going to have other services that they consider to be all-inclusive that are going to be in-house, whether it's a contracted provider or whether they actually have the staff and provide those services themselves. That would be all-inclusive. Some of those venues are also going to allow you to bring outside choices in. A partially inclusive venue would be a venue that is providing you with their building, tables and chairs, setup and breakdown of those things, but allows outside sources such as catering, your bar, that sort of stuff.
And when I talk about partially and DIY type venues, those sometimes can be very similar to each other. Generally, when I separate them, the partially inclusive has a little bit more to offer. A lot of times you're getting some kind of staffing with the facility to do setup, tear down, help assist with lots of things during the day. Generally, you get the venue for the entire day from morning until late at night. You can bring your stuff in, do setup, all that sort of thing, and you get a little bit more of a service. When I talk about DIY, that's generally just keys to the building or someone unlocks it for you. And many times you're having to do the setup and the breakdown of the chairs yourself if they're provided, or you need to bring those in if they're not provided. Generally speaking, those types of places are usually by the hour and not necessarily for the whole day. So that is more of the DIY side, and then the partially inclusive has a little bit more extra. But some of them can be very similar. In both of them, you have options to bring in your own catering, your own bar, any of the things that you want to have on your wedding day. Those are all options that you can select and have the control over.
Every venue type has pros and cons. And when you are putting together your ideal wedding and your wedding budget and your guest list, there's lots of factors that go into what scenario is best for your situation. As we go through the different venue types today, I have 4 different venue comparisons that we're going to look at, each from one of those categories I just described, and we are going to line them up side by side, line item by line item, so that you can see a true comparison of price for each one of those scenarios and really understand what it takes to put together a comparison chart so that you make sure you're comparing apples to apples when you're out shopping for venues in your own area.
Okay, so we're going to get started looking at the different venue comparisons that I put together.
Again, this is a comparison between 4 different styles of venues that are located here in Ohio. I have selected all these venues based on the fact that they're very popular. They're not on the low end, they're not on the high end, they're somewhere in the middle. But they are all very popular, and so I've decided to compare these 4 side by side, as I feel like they'd be a good representation of today's average bride. So the first one we're going to take a look at is here. It is a all-inclusive venue. The first one that we're going to look at is set up as a buffet. So this particular all-inclusive is a venue that is freestanding. You get the building, you have the option to do your ceremony on site if you are looking for a same location ceremony versus going to a church or another location. So they do charge separately for that option in case you are getting married at a church or somewhere else and you would like to forego paying that option at the venue. So that particular piece of the venue is $1,500. It does include the chairs, the setup and the takedown, as well as an indoor and outdoor ceremony option if weather is an issue. So that is the first part of this all-inclusive. If you go down further, you will see that the venue itself / tent, because we are going to compare these all side by side, so we're going to say venue for this particular one, is all included, as well as the tables, the chairs, the catering, any permits and fees, any of that kind of stuff, which you'll see later. That category is really set there for the tent comparison that we're going to do. So going on down the page, you're going to see here how I have it set up to compare pricing when it comes to the food. So this particular venue charges you a per person rate. We are basing all of the comparisons on 160 people. That is pretty typical for what I deal with on a daily basis when it comes to guest count. That would be my average. So this particular buffet is going to be set with artisan bread, a garden salad, a beef short rib option, Italian chicken option, roasted vegetables, red potatoes, and then it includes coffee, tea, and water. So their per person rate for this particular dinner is $127 per person. So when you multiply that out by the 160 guest count, this $20,320 is going to be your total for those items. So when you go further down, you're going to see what else is included in that. They do offer all of the table setting pieces, which would include china, flatware, glassware, and napkin, as well as a floor-length tablecloth in a various array of colors. So all of those particular things are included in their per person rate. And then they do have a coordinator that will work with you throughout your planning process, obviously only for the pieces that happen to be facilitated within their facility, not things that are external. And then the setup and the pack-up of your items at the end of the night, whether it be gifts and anything that you brought in for your wedding. So when it comes to the bar package, they do have a beer and wine package that is included in that $127 per person rate. If you would like an option of liquor of some sort, White Claws are priced separately at $3 per person at 160 people. That would be an additional $480. Premium liquor would be an additional charge, and the premium liquor would include all the different things that you could imagine. So that's going to be $20 per person in addition to the other fees. At 160 people is going to bring you to $3,200 additional dollars. Now, they price this particular package
as far as the bar is concerned on 4.5 hours. So that $20 per person or $23 per person, however you want to look at that, is based on 4.5 hours. If you are planning to do a cocktail hour, that is included in your hours that you have for the 4.5 hours. However, if you would like to have a cocktail hour either in their outside patio area or in their lobby area, not in the actual room where the reception is taking place, that is an additional bar setup fee, and that adds another $500 to the total. If you would like to have cocktail tables added to your cocktail hour so guests can stand around and have drinks and appetizers and set plates and drinks down on those tables, that is an additional charge of $20 per table. So we accounted for 5 of those based on 160 people. As most people do want to have a cocktail hour separated from the reception room. So I went ahead and accounted for that in this particular comparison. This particular venue also does include a floral centerpiece, which is done by their in-house floral staff. They have options that you can select from. It only includes your guest tables. It does not include your head table or any of the bouquets or anything for yourself or the bridal party. So it's strictly centerpieces for the guest tables. A DJ is included for your reception that comes with the package, as well as a wedding cake. So that also comes with the package. You do not have selections on those. They are just their in-house providers, and that is who you get. So as you scroll down towards the bottom, you're going to start to see the totals of everything adding up. So what I've done is I put the subtotal of all the above items that are included together. So originally, if we scroll up here, you will see that it started out at $20,320, and then once alcohol was added and some cocktail hour options, then it brought the price to $26,100. This particular venue does charge a service fee. Their fee is 22%. The sales tax here is 7.5%. We just rounded everything up for comparison purposes to 8%. One thing that is not factored into many people's budgets is that nowadays most wedding vendors pass the credit card transaction fee on to the customers. Most of these fees, everyone is making very large purchases, and small wedding vendors are unable to carry those costs because they are not factored into their services when they price quote people out. So the fees that are charged back to them are very hefty, and almost all vendors have now gone to a credit card transaction fee in order to help alleviate those costs. One thing that I should note here is that when you look at their service fee, many of the other venues that you're going to see and compare do charge a service fee as well. However, the service fee on many of those other venues is only on the food and beverage piece of it. Because this venue is an all-inclusive venue, all of their items are wrapped together in a total price. So it doesn't separate food, beverage, centerpieces, cake, DJ, and those things separate. And so you aren't able to charge the service fee only on that portion. So that service fee is actually on the total bill. In addition, anything that you add on this particular venue, all things go through them. So when they are adding those things to your bill, and those things are being brought in and provided for you, any kind of upgrades or anything like that, that service fee is also charged on top of those items. So that is one of the cons of this particular venue. simply because that fee can become very high when you're adding all the stuff to your bill that's making your wedding day what you want it to be. All the pretties, all the extras are getting charged that service fee in addition to the extra stuff that you're bringing in. So that can add up very quickly, and something that you should consider when you are comparing out the total pricing of all the venue options that you're considering. So as you can see, once you add in the service fee, the sales tax, and the credit card transactions, that you're adding nearly $10,000 in additional charges over and above what you are paying just for the food and the other services. So it does add up very quickly. A lot of people do not even think to add that or factor that into their budgets. So you can see just how much this can get out of control pretty quickly if you don't sit down, do your due diligence, and really make sure that you are understanding all the additional charges that could be coming your way if you're only looking at the per person rate and you aren't factoring in all of the other details. So it went from $127 per person to $220 per person by adding in all those extra things. So now we're going to hop over to the partial inclusive. And what I mean by partial inclusive is that you are getting a building, you are getting tables, you're getting chairs, you're getting the use of the building, getting ready, all those sorts of things. So basically, you can do as you choose and have options to select from. So you're not locked into a particular caterer, you're not locked into a particular florist or any of those things, and you do have options. So when you look at it this way, you're going to see some higher numbers maybe in some categories than you are in the others as far as the line items are concerned. But once you break it all down, you'll be able to really compare side by side which one is going to be more cost effective for you. In this particular case, you get the building the entire day, so you are able to get in and do your own setup. Or you can hire someone to come in and do that piece for you. If you would like to have your ceremony on site, that is also included, and the chairs that come with the facility are also included. So that piece of it is already added into the venue total. The venue total you see here is $8,000. Again, that's going to include your tables and chairs. I will say that on this particular venue, the chair that is included in the venue is one of the most highly rented chairs. If you are to go to a venue that doesn't have a chair that you particularly like, and you want to go rent chairs from a rental company, this is probably one of the #1 chairs that does get rented. So that is kind of a perk as far as that's concerned, because it is an expensive chair to rent, and that already does come with the venue. It comes with a variety of different table sizes, enough for everything as to cover your guest count. The other fees, again, those apply to tents, which we'll get into when we start comparing that last one. Now, on this particular one, we are selecting an outside caterer that is very comparable to the catering service being provided by the all-inclusive venue option that we were selecting. The difference with this particular caterer and the all-inclusive is that we can see the dollar that they are charging for each line item, whereas in the all-inclusive, you get a set price and you do not know how much each one of those items is costing individually. So what I have done here is I've taken the menu and done a line-by-line comparison, and I've priced out based on that particular caterer's meal options for that. So as you can see, it's the same items: the bread, the salad, short ribs, chicken, vegetables, potatoes, coffee, tea, and water. These are the prices for each one of those items. Again, we are comparing to 160 people and guest counts. So you can see that the food total is coming to $4,300. The venue is $8,000, and then we need to add in all the things below. So this particular venue, the caterer does have the option to bring the china, the flatware, glassware, and a napkin. They price that as a per person option. So you get all those things included, and you see the price here, $1,040. You also have the option to rent your own linens in any color, material, size, whatnot that you need. And so I, being on this side of the industry, very quickly popped in the numbers, knowing this venue and our experience with them and how those work. So $16 a linen. This guest count would require 20 tables. So the linens are representing $320. Now, the caterer does offer a coordinator setup and pack up option. So I went ahead and added that in since the all-inclusive package already factors that into their pricing. So it is an optional package. They do have multiple options. You could go less. You could, I think this is their max. I went ahead with the max. They will pack up your items at the end of the night, which is helpful because you are bringing in a lot of those items in yourself since you are not in an all-inclusive venue. Now we get down to the bar. This is where a big part of the perk of the bar comes in. This particular venue does not have a liquor license. The first venue that we compared owns their liquor license. In the state of Ohio, if a venue owns a liquor license, no outside alcohol of any sort is allowed into the building. Everything has to be provided through the venue. This particular venue here, because it's a partial inclusive, they're providing you the venue. You bring in the rest. The requirement is that you do have a licensed bartender, which if your venue doesn't require that, I would absolutely tell you should do that no matter what anyways, for lots of reasons. But this particular venue, you do have to hire licensed bartenders in order to serve the alcohol. But what the perk of this is that you now have the flexibility to bring in whatever alcohol you would like to provide. So if you are having a guest list filled with nothing but beer drinkers, you may not even want a wine option. If you have a particular kind of alcohol that your group tends to be fans of, you can then go and just get that particular alcohol and do not have to have 100 different options at hand. So you can be very selective in what you pick, but you have the flexibility to just pay what the retail rates are on them versus the rates that you're getting charged at the all-inclusive venue. And again, you can pick and choose and you have the option to get variety. Now, what you will need to figure out when you go that route is you will need to figure out how much you will need to plan per person, which a good bartending company would be very helpful in giving you that information based on what you want to serve and how many you need to serve per person for the length of time that your wedding is going to be taking place. So that is a big perk and a way to save money on the alcohol side of things if you are going to be serving alcohol at your wedding, to look for an option that has the ability to bring in what you select. Their cocktail hour is included in all of those prices there because again, you get the whole venue, you bring in your own alcohol. All you're having to do is pay for the bartenders to be on site. So table linens, I separated the linens for the cocktail hour the way I did in the first one so that we stuck to 5. So you have that piece of it. And then the appetizers from the first venue that we compared to were included in the $127 per person rate that they had. They give you 2 options for appetizers. So I did 2 appetizers for this particular venue as well so that you could see. So at the end here, we went ahead and accounted for a floral centerpiece for the guest table, a DJ, and the cake. So I actually got the pricing for the cake, which is the same baker that the first venue uses, so that it's basically the exact same cake, just being separated out and being paid for separate. The DJ is very comparable to the DJs that are in-house at the all-inclusive. And then the floral centerpieces, because the all-inclusive uses their in-house florals, I accounted for about $25 per table for a similar centerpiece of what they would provide. So if you were to provide those things on your own, this is what you're looking at for your cake DJ and centerpieces. This is what you're looking at for your bar, your food, your venue, so on and so forth. So when we go down to the bottom and we start comparing the totals, I'm going to show you here the differences that you are really going to want to pay attention to at the end of the day. This is where the fees are going to be different between your all-inclusive venue and this venue. This venue only charges a food and beverage fee, and that is to the caterer, basically to cover the cost of the fact that they have to clean the kitchen after the caterers are done and get the building back into its usable condition for the next person. So they charge a 13% fee to have that caterer in their building, and that is only on the food and beverage. So if you are not having all those other things that you would have in the all-inclusive getting charged to you, you're going to save a significant amount of money by only having that service fee charged on the food and beverage. Also, their fee is significantly lower than some of the other venues. So the 13% that they're charging is saving you quite a bit of money versus the 22% on top of all items on their invoice at the all-inclusive. We're going to stick to the same tax just to be the same across the board, and then the credit card transaction as well. So you can see that there is a pretty significant difference per person when you look at the all-inclusive versus the partial inclusive. Now, when you're comparing these two, it is important to remember that at the all-inclusive, you are doing minimal work. You are walking in, everything is there, it's done for you. You leave at the end of the night, all those things are taken care of on your behalf. When you go to a partially inclusive venue, you are doing way more work. You are having to purchase the alcohol, bring the alcohol, do all that kind of stuff. On this particular venue, the bartender actually provides the mixers, the ice, all the accoutrement that you would need for your bar service. So really at that point, really all you're doing is bringing the physical alcohol. So that $5.25 per person is actually well worth it because you don't have to worry about all those other things. They're bringing disposable cups, again, the mixers, the ice, all the things that you would need to set up your bar. And they are doing the work on setting up the bar. It's simply you having to do the work to go to the liquor stores and purchase these items and then transport them there. So sometimes that's extremely worth it, depending on what the cost is at the end. We're looking at this partial inclusive bar being $1,040, and then we hop over to the all-inclusive bar and we look, and that's $4,280. So at the end of the day, not only do you need to compare the particular categories within the venue and pricing wise, but also at the very bottom, what that looks like. Just knowing that some things are going to be more work on your part. And so it's just a level, depending on whether or not you have the budget to pay for that level of service, or if you would rather, do some of the legwork yourself and save some money, or spend it in other areas. So those are two very popular venues, like I said, here in Ohio, that are constantly booked and very comparable to each other. Okay, so here we are on our third option, which is a DIY rental. It's a rental space that's by the hour. It is a very popular location, a lot because of its view, and it's a unique building that is very popular. And I also think that because it is a DIY by the hour, it is very popular to brides because they tend to see that as a cost savings factor. So when we look at this particular venue, again, the ceremony is part of it. If you are renting in enough time in order to have your ceremony on location, it does not cost any extra for the chairs there, unless you would rather have a different chair than what is provided. So that is included. When you go down to the venue rental piece of it, it is hourly. This is run by the Parks and Recs Department of the city. So the hourly rate is $225, and the amount of hours that we're going to account for is 7 hours. That gives you an hour after your reception ends to get out of the building. There are some strict requirements in order to do that. And then gives you time prior to your reception and or ceremony, if you decide to have it there, to get into the building and do setup. Now, this particular facility is somewhat difficult to work in. There is no parking lot on site. So because it is downtown, the parking is walkable. There are garages and things nearby, but your guests are going to have to pay to park and walk. There's a limited amount of parallel parking along the front of the building, but everything else you need to find a place to park or Uber. So the venue rental itself is $1,575. This particular venue, I find that a lot of the brides, when they first book it, are so excited because it's inexpensive and they plan to do all these different things to it. However, what they don't realize is because all these extra things that they want to do require in and out only during their rental period, so you can't bring anything in beforehand and nothing can stay after. You need to make sure that you account for additional time to get that stuff in and out. So then you're adding on to the amount of hours that you need to rent. It's just it's just a little bit more complicated, not as flexible. So when they do want to rent those things, they don't realize as well that most of the rental companies charge an additional fee because of the time that they have to get in and out of the building. It requires some more specific things than a normal delivery, and therefore they get hit with fees on that end, which we will talk about in another video. But this is we're going to go with the bare minimum here. We're just going to assume that the chairs that they have in that facility are going to be used by the bride. So when you get down to the food, we are going to go with the exact same catering bill that we went to the previous location, which was the partial inclusive. So same caterer, same meal, same everything there. Table settings, same exact situation. They have the same tables. You're going to need the same quantities. So all that is going to remain the same. Coordinator, setup, pack up. This is very important at this particular venue. This is really, it's all about the timing because of the crunch of time that you have to do your work and get it set up and whatnot. It's very important that you have help to get that all accomplished. Bar is going to remain the same for the same reasons. We're using the same bartender, the same formulas and whatnot there. Same goes for the floral centerpieces, the DJ, the cake, whatnot. We're going to keep it consistent. So the difference is going to be at the bottom here when you get to your bill. So there is no service fee at this particular location. Again, you're renting it by the hour. It's basically a shelter house. The city runs it. You get tables and chairs. They will set them up and take them down. They clean the building. That is all. So everything else is provided by outside vendors. But again, no service fee is being charged to them on any of that. So you can save a couple $100 there compared to the partial inclusive at 13%. The sales tax is going to remain the same because that has to be charged by your caterer and all the other providers that you are getting services from. And again, the credit card transaction fee is going to be the same across the board because that is going to be charged on all the items that you purchase. So at the end of the day, when you look at the total here, you're going to save a little bit more. Your cost per person is going down. There's definitely more work involved in this particular scenario. But if you are on a limited budget and you're trying to do things as inexpensive as possible, this is a great option. You may just have to forego some of the extra things that you want to do to the building just because of the added fees that would come with this. And again, I will talk about that whole thing in another video. So what we're going to discuss right now is the final category, which will be our tent category. Now this can be in a family member's backyard, your own personal backyard, but I'm going to assume that it's in someone's yard or property that we do not need to add a fee for, that you're using free of charge. So in this particular scenario, we're going to account for additional chairs outside of the reception chairs and assume a ceremony is going to be on site. So in order to prevent having to move chairs from the ceremony location to the tent site, we are going to just go ahead and add that chair rental piece in there. So moving on to the actual tent itself. Now, this particular tent, I am going with the 60 by 100. It's a sailcloth tent. I'm using that number. It is on the higher end of tent rentals. I'm using that because it's a very popular option. Brides tend to like the look of the tent. However, if you are not concerned about the look of the tent so much, you can definitely cut the cost of that tent by about half, and save some money on that respect. But we're just going to assume for now that we're going to go with one of the most popular tent options. Keep in mind when you do rent a tent versus a venue that you are basically building a venue from the ground up. Where when you are at a venue, you have the use of their tables and chairs, bathrooms, sometimes prep kitchens, and what those types of places have to offer, electricity, all those things. When you move things to an outdoor facility, a backyard, property, farm, whatever it is, you have to now build all of that. So once you have your tent, you also need your tables and chairs. You also need bathrooms if you do not have access to restrooms readily available, or if you're in a home and you don't want people in and out of your home, restrooms would be an option, especially for a large wedding of 160 people. One bathroom or two bathrooms in your home are not going to be enough for that amount of people. Plus the distance of where the tent is going to be placed versus where those bathrooms are going to be located is another factor. So you want to definitely think about mobile restrooms of some sort when it comes to a tent wedding. There are fees associated with every tent. Every tent is required to have an inspection by a fire marshal to ensure its safety, and a tent permit is required by nearly every municipality that I've ever encountered. So you will need to account for those fees. They can be pretty hefty. I have accounted for $575 for permits and fees, which is about average for the location that I am in. Some can be less, some may be more. In addition, you are in a backyard or in the middle of a field and you do not have electricity readily available. People forget about all the different things that need to get plugged in. The caterer will have needs, the DJ or band will have needs. If your tent wedding is going to be into the evening hours and it's going to get dark, you will need lighting inside your tent. So that will require electricity. Lots of things. There's coffee pots, other stuff that you're probably not even considering. And so you will more than likely need to have a generator brought in order to power those items. Tent lighting is an additional cost, so separate from the tent, that is the lighting. You'll probably want a dance floor. That is also going to be a pretty significant charge. So just before we even get to the food, you're looking at approximately $15,000. You basically are building a venue in your yard. So again, you can shave some off of that if you go with a different style of tent. You could cut that down a couple $1,000, but you're still probably going to be around the $10,000 mark for your tent and all the needed things that are going to go under there. And this truly isn't even all the little details that we'll need to figure out for that tent. These are just some of the number one things that are definitely going to be required. A catering tent, that is separate. That is so that your caterers have a back of house to work out of, so they can either, place dishes, dirty dishes in places, plate meals, whatever it is that needs to happen on the catering staff. They need a separate tent to work under, whether it be good weather or rainy weather or whatever it may be. They need that covering for many reasons. So something to consider when you are considering doing a tent wedding. Scrolling down, we're going to go real quick through this because this is all going to be a repeat of the last two venues that we looked at. We are duplicating everything. So the buffet is going to be exactly the same caterer. Again, place settings, tables, the bar, all of that is exactly the same all the way down through the cake. Where it's going to matter is when we get to the subtotals. And here you can see the subtotal, you're looking at $26,000. Of course, you don't have the service fees since it's on your own property and you're not charging yourself. But when we look at tax, that's about $2,000. And then again, the credit card transaction fees, because those are all going to be charged by all the vendors who are participating in your tent wedding. So when you get down to the bottom, you're looking at a grand total of $29,500. So when you look and break that down on cost per person, it actually is a higher number than your DIY venue and your partially inclusive venue. So that is something to seriously consider before you go into the tent wedding. A lot of people just think it's a cheaper option because they're not held to minimums. They're not held to a lot of different things that are obligations in actual venues. But when you have to do everything basically from scratch and build a venue, then it does take a lot more work and effort on your part. Another thing to consider when it comes to a tent wedding is what the weather conditions are going to be. And if you are anywhere near Ohio, we have 4 very distinct seasons in Ohio. We have winter, spring, summer, and fall. And those seasons are very unpredictable weather-wise. They are not a consistent there's nothing consistent about them. You never know when you're going to get a super windy day. You never know when you're going to get a thunderstorm, a tornado, snow, extreme heat, or any possibility. And so when you have a tent wedding and you go through the expense of, as you can see, building a tent in your backyard, you also have to consider all of the weather factors that Mother Nature throws at you and have a backup plan ready and to go, because I've seen some pretty disastrous events that did not have backup plans, that did not account for weather factors of sorts, and have gotten themselves in some pretty nasty circumstances. And so that's always something to think about, especially if you are in an area that has inconsistent, unpredictable weather conditions, and just weigh out the risks of that day. What I find is the people that don't have backup plans are always the ones that need them. So it's always a great thought. It looks beautiful. Yes, in some parts of the country where you have very consistent weather, little bits of rain, always pretty much on par on a day-to-day basis, it's a little bit more of an easy piece to accomplish versus some places where, again, the weather is not going to be predictable and somewhat not cooperative. And so you have to worry about the risk of that. And many people do not know that tents are not really a safe place during thunderstorms. So if you have lightning or poor weather, bad weather conditions, it's really not a safe place for people to be. And so you would still want to take shelter. And if you can't predict when those are going to happen, you're taking a pretty big risk in having that tent in your backyard for such a large occasion. Okay, so now that we have compared and looked at each venue individually and what they charge and how they price their venue specifics. I wanted to line all four up side by side, line item by line item, so that you can look at that big picture here and see where the big differences lie, so that when you are touring your venues and you are getting all your pricing quotes, that you can take all of that information and do exactly what I'm showing you here. Line them up one by one and break them down, and then compare those line items as you go and get the full total price, not just pieces and parts of the prices of each venue. It's very difficult to decipher how much you're paying at each venue until you lay them out and really try to see which one is a better, more effective cost benefit for yourselves. So when you do that and you get your final total per person, it's much easier to be able to see if this is a manageable budget for you for your wedding day before you make that final commitment. So this is how I have them lined up, all four, all the way across. Line item by line item, you can see we started with the ceremony. We did in each individual one. And as you can see, the all-inclusive is, of all of them, the larger fee. Again, not everyone has their wedding ceremony on site at the venue, but we are going to assume that in this particular scenario, that is going to be the case. So if that is not the case for you, you would just need to add in whatever that ceremony cost is going to be for wherever your location is, whether it's a church, a park, or your backyard, or somewhere else that you're doing your ceremony location. Whatever the cost of that is going to be, you would just substitute in this particular scenario. All right, so moving down to the venue piece of it / tent. As you can see, this all-inclusive, they don't separate out the charge for their building or room, since everything is priced as a package. So there is no price there. This particular venue, you're paying for the venue rental. Again, the ceremony and the tables and chairs are all included in that. This one is by the hour. We're saying 7 hours at $225 an hour. Realistically, you probably need more than that, but I'm going to keep this assuming that that particular bride or this particular scenario, we're not bringing in extra rentals, that we're just going to stick with the chairs that the venue uses. So 7 hours is a doable thing. It's very tight. There's not a ton of stuff that can be done to it in that time frame, but we're going to run with 7 hours on this. And that'll give you 4 hours for your reception and an hour out of the building. So anything other than that will be pre-set up. And then we have the tent rental. So again, you can see the difference in prices from the $8,000 for the partial venue rental, the $1,500 for the DIY, and the $15,000 for the tent in your backyard. Again, there's no breakdown for the cost of the all-inclusive. Okay, then we get to dinner, and this is going to be different here. This looks like a higher number because, again, this is a 0, so this is wrapped into this. This is the same across the board because we use the identical caterer. Again, the caterer that I used for this scenario is very equal and comparative to the all-inclusive catering, and so I feel like this pricing is very comparative to this pricing. Then we're going to go down to the setup and the linen piece of this. Once again, this is a 0 because it is wrapped into this number here. This is the same across the board as we've already discussed. Same with the coordinator and setup. This coordinator and setup at the all-inclusive is their in-house caterer. They are handling all the details that are inside of their venue. You are still coordinating and dealing with all your other vendors that you are booking and talking to, but they're handling any of the details that are included in the venue package. This particular scenario here, the caterer is dealing with anything that is happening at the reception, from setup all the way to breakdown and pack up. So that is what those line items are for. Then we get into the bar, and again, this discrepancy is based off of the fact that the bar on the all-inclusive is hosted by the venue. They own the liquor license. Everything goes through them. No outside alcohol can come in. These are the prices that they charge. The other three scenarios are all flexible based on your preferences on what you would like to have at your bar, and you are paying the retail prices. Your bartender needs to be provided. They will bring the mixers, set up the bar, do all that sort of stuff. I think that's well worth it based on all of my years of experience. And then at this point, you are just, again, providing the alcohol that you would like to have served at your wedding. These numbers could even increase if you have heavier drinkers, and you'd still, even if you doubled everything, you're still half of the cost of the bar at the all-inclusive. That to me is the significant difference between the comparisons to date. So we scroll down again, we're talking about included florals for your guest tables, centerpieces by their in-house florist, their in-house DJ, their cake person. Separated out, comparable centerpieces would be $25. Comparable DJ would be $400, and then the exact cake based off of the person that supplies their cakes would be $920. The big thing about that is that you can actually have some flexibility as well. And if you are not a cake person and you would just simply like a small cutting cake and then serve other types of desserts, you do have the flexibility in doing that, where in this all-inclusive package, it is the cake and the cake only. Any extra desserts would be an extra charge. So the big difference is when you get to the bottom, and that is where you see the totals adding up. Now, your all-inclusive is $26,000, and if you notice, your tent is about the same price. And truthfully, the big reason for that is because the cost of building a tent and adding all the little things that need to go into the tent is really where your expense is coming from. If you were having this in your backyard and you didn't have a tent and you could get rid of some of those things, it would be significantly lower. However, you really can't bank on weather being beautiful and having all of those things outside of a tent and really feel good about going into your wedding day and not having a disaster upon you. Unless you're in, like I said, a very consistent weather climate where that is never a concern. But this part of the country, that is never going to happen. So a tent is 99.9% of the time required. Okay, so then you look at the two middles, and these numbers are definitely different from each other. I would say if you are into doing a whole bunch of extra work and your budget is tight, what we're looking at in yellow right here is the DIY, that is actually a pretty decent option. Again, there's a bunch of extra things that go into this particular thing that I didn't account for that could be done, but it's just going to drive the cost of your wedding up. This right here, at the end of the day, when you look at the quality, these two right here, the blue and the pink, are probably neck and neck when it comes to brides wanting to book. I think this one, they hear a per person rate and it sounds appealing and attractive, and they know what their number is going to be, so they tend to go with it. This one, I think brides tend to go with it because they love the venue, they love the chairs that come with the venue, they love the location of the venue, and then they like the fact that they can bring in their own items and have options. So these two, I would say, are very competitive with each other. But when you look at the bottom line, That is the big significant difference to me. When you have $26,000, and yes, it is covering a number of things where this one isn't. You have a full staff of people that are doing the setup. This one, you are really doing the work yourself, but if you have a planner or you have people to help you, you could get away with that and save some money, because it is a significant difference in the end. The biggest difference is at the bottom, and this is the part where I say is the most important reason why you need to lay every one of your choices out in this format so you can really see what the true costs are. It's impossible to tell what the true costs are when you're only hearing a per person number, and then you're piecing things together and you're not totaling them all together. So here's the difference. When you look at the service fee line, they charge 22% on top of your bill. And that bill is everything you do. So your all-inclusive, your alcohol, anything you add on to your contract. So if you decide you want an upgraded linen, or you want added chargers or something added to your all-inclusive that is not part of the all-inclusive, you're going to get billed in addition to this $26,000. It will get added on, and then this 22% service fee also gets added to that. So the 22% service fee is on the total. So I'm stressing that again so that people can really understand where their money is going, because it does add up very quickly. So that is the significant difference between this and the rest of these. This particular venue doesn't charge a fee on all the extras. They're only charging the 13%, which is half, basically, of the food and beverage. So they're not adding the florals, they're not adding the linens, they're not adding any of those extra things that you're bringing in on your own. They are not charging you a service fee on that. So that is a significant difference in cost, and this amount that you are paying extra can be used towards some of the other things that you really want. So then you look down at the sales tax, and again, the sales tax is going to be higher because it's on a higher number, and then the credit card transaction also going to be higher because it's on a higher number. So that is something to me that I think every single couple, their families, all need to take the time to sit down and lay out in their own area and really compare what you're getting, because at the end of the day, the totals speak for themselves in what you're doing. Even with the tent, it is still less, even though the tent is more, it is still less than the all-inclusive, because of the fact that you are not paying that 22% service charge on top of all the things that you're putting in your tent. So when you see, and again, if you look at the top where this started out was $127 per person, and now it's $220 per person. And this is now $135 per person, and this is $85, and this is $184. So I think you can understand where I'm going with this and see the difference. And really, truly, when you go to a venue, be educated enough to start asking those questions about the service fees and what they're charged on and what all the extras are that aren't included. If your venue that you're touring is an all-inclusive, get the specifics on what those all-inclusives are. And if you have ideas in your mind going into it that there's things that you know that you absolutely want to have, you need to check with that venue and ask them if that is something you bring in on your own, or is that something that they're going to require goes onto your bill that they then charge you the fee for, because that is a big, big difference.
Okay, so that's going to wrap up our venue comparison. And I really hope that this was informational for you, that you really understand and see the difference between the pricing structures that each venue is going to have, so that when you are sitting down and comparing, you're able to break down very similar to how I did here and ensure that you're comparing apples to apples instead of apples to oranges, and really know what you're getting at each venue before you go and make that decision. If this video is helpful for you, please make sure you like, share, subscribe, all the things that you need to do in order to follow along for the rest of my videos, because there's plenty more where this one came from.